It was on a very foggy October day, I remember, and a butler opened the door, and I was asked to go into the parlour to have tea. And I waited, and then Cecil Beaton appeared, and he said, "What can I do for you?" And I said, "Well, I'd very much like to look at some of your pictures. I'm thinking about making this my profession." He said, "My boy, don't make it your profession. There's too many people doing it." And I went away from that house more determined to become a photographer than when I went there. When I was a junior photographer, learning the trade, I'd come from the Air Force, Cinema Studios, and this was really my first great challenge. And to be asked to photograph the most wonderful figure of Marlene Dietrich surprised me very much. So I had to do my best. I was on a very large stage, which was 180 feet by 100 feet, enormously. I had a tiny portion of that stage, and I remember that the publicity director said she would be arriving at 11, and promptly at 11 I saw the red light go on in the entrance of the stage, and then came in first was the assistant director. After that came the wardrobe mistress. After that came the hairdresser, and then came the producer, and then came Marlene Dietrich. And as they all walked towards the camera, I couldn't help but turning the radio on, because the radio was the only form of music you could get at the time. And as I turned the radio on, it played Colonel Bogey. And as they walked towards me, I thought, I was unaware of it until she got towards me and then walked over to the radio and turned it off and said, "It's not necessary, Mr. Lucas. Shall we start?" Well, I was rather shaken by that. It was a perfect sitting for her legs, which were insured for $1 million. And with that wonderful Binks doll, which was worth £50,000 at the time, made in Paris, I thought she had to have a full figure. But after I'd taken the full figure with the legs, which were perfect legs, I went into close-up. That's the only time I had. But it affected my entire career. When you did them on a plate camera, it wasn't like a Rolleiflex or a 35mm camera. Every picture you took, you had to make quite sure was sharp. And on the plate, if you look at that picture, her nose and eyes are sharp, but that's not sharp. And you only had time to do 3 or 4 pictures. You didn't have time to do more. The time you walked from the back of the camera to the front of the camera, you had to do that about 8 times before you took a picture. How much patience she needed to watch me go back to the camera, put the slide in, pull the sheath out, take the picture, put the sheath back again, take the slide out, put it down, and say thank you. In fact, sometimes she didn't move to say anything. I felt I had to interfere with her thoughts. I had in front of me with Marlene Dietrich the most perfect sitter. If I got a particular pose in the camera and I said that would be perfect, she patiently held it. And as you could see from that picture, that the ash on the cigarette must have been stillness for at least 3 minutes, or 2 or 3 minutes. And she was as patient, because I think she felt that what I was doing was right. She said to me, "Mr. Lucas, I'm telling you now that a photograph to me is more important than the film." Well, what a challenge I had. And I felt that when I was photographing her, she was giving me everything she could give me in that picture. And I was doing my best as a junior to give her the best results. She gave, I think, all photographers all. She had a certain amount of effective control with the person who was doing the job. And if you're learning, like I was, it was a great teacher. She would look at the various positions of the lights, and she knew if the light was in the wrong position, she would correct it or ask you to correct it. She could visualize like a photographic meter and say, "Mr. Lucas, I think the one's a bit too hot." She was so technical. It was a great amicable agreement between the two. The publisher director expected me to show rough proofs the next day, which I did, and I went to her dressing room and showed her the rough proofs, and she looked and leaned down beside her to her handbag and took out the most largest magnifying glass like this and looked at them. With the other hand she got an eyebrow black pencil from her bag and she ticked and marked the print as she thought she would like it retouched. And away I went. And the next day, she said, I'll see them the next day, and I took them to her. And she looked at them again with a magnifying glass. It was quite charming. And leaned over and shook my hand and said, join the club, Mr. Lucas. Well, I didn't know what she meant by joining the club, but obviously it meant that I was on the threshold of doing something different. I then learnt that light and shade made the image in its beauty. I remember being told by publicity that my technique would be difficult to get published because it was so black and white, and magazines wanted more flatter pictures, and I insisted I would not change my technique. And in the end, editors were asking for my pictures because they loved the dimension of them. So it changed my entire career, because after you photographed Marlene Dietrich, you were there. And I think in life, this happens in careers. You're given an opportunity, and if luck's with you, and you can be coupled to it, and do your best, and something comes of it, it's worthwhile. What better sitter could I have? The most attractive woman in the world, and I was given the opportunity to photograph her. And from that picture, I think the Rank organisation asked me to form the glamour section of the pool studio at Pinewood. And I think it was from that picture that gave me that key to the door.